There's a certain kind of person who apologizes before you even finish your sentence. They say sorry for being late by 2 minutes, sorry for having an opinion, sorry for taking up space in a conversation they were invited into. And here's the strange part. Nothing bad actually happened. No one accused them of anything. But somewhere inside, a switch flipped, and it told them, this is your fault. If you've ever felt like the problem in every room you walk into, even when the evidence says otherwise, you're not broken. You're running a program that was installed a long time ago, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly where it came from and why it's lying to you. Think about the last time something went wrong around you. A friend seemed distant. A meeting felt tense. A silence lasted a second too long. What was your first thought? For most people, it's confusion. For some people, it's an immediate, almost automatic verdict. I did something wrong. Here's the psychological question worth asking. Why would a mind default to blaming itself over and over without any real proof? The answer starts in childhood, and it starts with something psychologists John Bradshaw called toxic shame. Bradshaw made a critical distinction. Healthy shame is temporary. It's a signal that says, you made a mistake, fix it, move on. Toxic shame is different. It doesn't stay in the moment. It becomes who you are. It stops being I did something bad and becomes I am something bad. That shift from behavior to identity is where the always the problem feeling is born. But here's where it gets interesting. Bradshaw outlined how this actually gets installed in a person. It's not random. It happens in 3 steps. First, a child grows up around adults who are themselves carrying unprocessed shame, and the child absorbs it just by watching. Second, when a child's emotional needs go unmet, when they cry and no one comes, they don't conclude that the adult failed them. Children can't think that way. Instead, they conclude that they asked for too much. Their own needs become the thing they feel ashamed of. Third, these moments don't fade. They stack up in memory, layer after layer, until they fuse into a single belief: something is fundamentally wrong with me. Now something surprising happens. This belief doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It builds a survival strategy around itself. Psychologists describe something called the fantasy bond. A child depends completely on their parent to survive, so the mind protects that relationship at all costs, even if the parent is the source of the pain. The child cannot afford to think my parent is failing me, because that thought feels like annihilation. So the mind flips it. It becomes I am the failure. That single flip is one of the most quietly devastating moves the human brain makes. It sacrifices the child's self-image to protect the bond with the caregiver. There's another layer underneath that one. In many families, this shows up as something researchers call parentification. The child stops being the one who receives care and starts being the one who provides it, managing a parent's moods, absorbing their anger, becoming the emotional support system for someone who's supposed to be supporting them. When a child's real needs collide with what the parent wants from them, the child gets shamed for having needs at all. So they learn, early and thoroughly, that their existence is a burden. That lesson doesn't stay in childhood. It gets carried into every future relationship, wearing a different outfit each time. This is where trauma researcher Pete Walker's work becomes useful. Walker mapped out 4 survival responses people develop as children: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The always the problem pattern lines up almost perfectly with what he calls the fawn response. The core belief of a fawn type is simple and heartbreaking. If I please them and anticipate everything they need, they won't hurt me. As adults, fawn types over-apologize, over-explain, and quietly assume responsibility for other people's bad moods, because as children, that was the only strategy that ever kept them safe. Here's a real-life example of how this plays out. Someone sends a short text message, no punctuation, no explanation, and the person on the other end spends the next hour replaying every recent interaction. Searching for what they did wrong. Nothing happened. The other person was just busy. But the fawn-trained brain doesn't check for evidence first. It assumes fault first and looks for proof second. It shows up at work too. A manager gives neutral feedback: 2 things to improve, 3 things done well. Most people walk away balanced. The always the problem person walks away replaying only the 2, convinced they're one mistake from being seen as incompetent. The praise doesn't register. The criticism gets amplified until it drowns everything else out. That's not how feedback works. That's how a threat detection system works when it's been left running since childhood. What most people don't realize is that this isn't a personality flaw. It's a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, becomes chronically overactive in people who grew up this way. It starts treating neutral situations, a short text, a quiet room, a raised eyebrow, as potential danger. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for calm, logical reasoning, goes quiet under stress. So the emotional alarm fires before the rational brain even gets a vote. But here's the unexpected twist. This pattern isn't proof that something is wrong with the person experiencing it. It's proof that something was once wrong around them, and their mind adapted brilliantly to survive it. The constant self-blame wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. A child who takes the blame keeps the peace. A child who keeps the peace stays safe. It worked. The problem is, it never got updated for adulthood, where the same strategy just quietly exhausts you instead of protecting you. This changes everything once you actually see it clearly. Therapists describe an internal structure where wounded, younger parts of a person, sometimes called exiles, carry all of that old shame. Around those wounded parts, protector parts show up too. The inner critic, the over-apologizer, the peacekeeper, all working overtime to make sure that old pain never gets triggered again. The exhausting habit of assuming you're always the problem isn't your whole identity. It's one part of you, working an old job it was never supposed to keep forever. And that reframe matters, because the people who feel like the problem most often are, ironically, the ones who spend the most energy trying not to be. They overfunction. They over-apologize. They read a room 3 times before saying a single word in it. That's not carelessness. That's hypervigilance dressed up as consideration. So what actually helps? The first shift is simply naming it. When you catch yourself assuming fault with zero evidence, pause and ask, is this a fact or is this an old reflex? That single question interrupts the automatic response long enough for the rational brain to catch up. The second shift is practicing small, uncomfortable acts of not apologizing, saying what you actually think without cushioning it in 3 sorries first. It'll feel wrong at the beginning because it's unfamiliar, not because it's incorrect. The third shift is recognizing that healthy relationships can survive tension. Not every silence is a verdict. Not every short reply is a punishment. There's a fourth shift too, quieter than the others, but just as important. Learning to sit with someone else's bad mood without absorbing it as your own assignment to fix. Someone else's stress is not automatically your fault, and it's not automatically your job either. Letting that sink in is its own form of practice, one uncomfortable moment at a time. You are not the problem in every room. You were, at some point, a child who learned that being the problem was safer than being unloved. That belief did its job. It kept you afloat when you had no other option. But you're not in that room anymore. You get to leave the old strategy where it belongs, in the past, and start responding to today with the evidence that's actually in front of you. If this explained a pattern you've been quietly carrying for years, you're far from alone in it. Drop a comment if any part of this hit close to home, and subscribe if you want more videos like this one, breaking down the psychology behind the patterns we never chose, but somehow inherited anyway.